I want to welcome everybody to the session hosted by the Leadership Development Strategy Team. Thank you for being here. Please remember to mute your systems. The team members are myself, Angela Belknap, Bobby Joe Blood, Julie Folk, Claire Houghton, Jacqueline McRae Mitchell, Francie Mooney, Summer O'Neill, Paula Purdy, Carl Rees, and Crystal Smith, and Sandra Williams. And most of us are on here. However, some have family emergencies. I do not see Deb Novak had a family emergency. She is traveling out of town for a funeral, and Monica is not able to get on right now, but if she was on, she would bring you greetings from AAMA. We appreciate everybody for participating in our workshop. We want to say thank you to the CEB for allowing us to host this. Preethi Fernando is the author of 13 books, and she's a keynote speaker and the winner of the Stephen King's Haven Foundation Award. And that's given to one author each year. And she is going to be addressing us on a topic that we really need to hear about. So with that, no further ado, Preethi Fernando, this is all yours.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, American Association of Medical Assistants. Very excited to be here to talk about mental toughness, regaining our grit, tenacity, and resilience. Nothing amazing happens within our comfort zones. Everything that is spectacular, out of the ordinary, miracles happen outside of our comfort zones. Every miracle is preceded by an unimaginable problem, isn't it? If you look at your life, whether it's your personal life or it's your professional life, you look back at some event or a situation or a person, and you think, wow, that was a miracle. Well, that miracle was preceded by an unimaginable problem. Every miracle is preceded by an unimaginable problem. And what helps us to overcome those unimaginable problems is mental toughness. I have found that most things that leave us spellbound, most things that leave us in awe, typically happen after adversity, crisis, and sometimes even trauma. Mentally tough people know that underneath any adversity or crisis or trauma, there is an opportunity. There is some kind of reward beneath that pain. And sometimes it's so hard to see that. Mentally tough people, when they face adversity, an unimaginable problem or a trauma, they try to look for that seed of that lesson or the opportunity that underlies that problem. The comfort zone leads to ordinary results. Extraordinary results take place outside of our comfort zone, and we are creatures of habit, isn't it? When our body temperature is used to a certain degree in the thermostat, we want to keep it at that level in our home. We have a snowstorm right in Colorado right now, and I know exactly at what level I have to set my thermostat to stay warm. So we are creatures of habit. In terms of our life experiences, our work experiences, it's when we step out of our comfort zones that we get some of those extraordinary results. And those discomforting places test our endurance. They test our mental toughness. So what exactly is mental toughness? Simply put, it's our ability to perform consistently under stress and pressure. If you like, write it down. It's a very simple thing, but when we apply it to our daily living, it can mean so many different things. It's our ability to consistently perform under stress and pressure. And some of these pressures, some of the stressors in our lives, they take us off guard. And it's the thing that we did not see coming, the punch that we did not see coming, that knocks us down the hardest. Before it knocks us down, that's when our mental toughness kicks in. It could be a patient that makes whose story takes you off guard and you have a meltdown. Or under stress and pressure, maybe there was an error in the medication, or maybe there was an error in how you misunderstood, or you understood, but you heard it differently about a patient's health situation. It could be in our personal lives, things that take us off guard, that tend to throw us off balance. That's when mental toughness kicks in. So it's like a different mental gear. If you have ever driven a stick shift, how many of you have driven a stick shift? I didn't like it. That's how I learned to drive, but I don't like stick shift. But it's like that different gear that you put. When things get hard, you put on a different gear to make it up that mountain. That's an easier way of understanding what mental toughness is. And each and every one of us on this Zoom call today at the American Association of Medical Assistants, we all have a level of mental toughness. It's a question of what degree of it do we tap into it? What degree of it do we use at that moment when we need it the most? Mental toughness is the ability to stretch without snapping. So if you can see with me, it's a rubber band here that I have. So when you finish this Zoom call, reach out for a rubber band and you just keep stretching it. You can keep stretching it, but it doesn't really break. It doesn't snap. That's another way of looking at mental toughness. When those problems come, when we have to deal with a difficult physician, when we have to deal with a difficult nurse or a coworker, or we're living with someone very difficult to live with day in, day out, and we feel like snapping, but we don't snap. That's our mental toughness kicks in. And it pushes us beyond our comfort zone. So if this parameter is our comfort zone, when we begin to stretch, it tests our resilience. And it's our tenacity to not snap that keeps us together. That when the winds of change come, when the storms come, not every storm is in the forecast. Not every storm is in the forecast. So when there's some storm that affects us at work, at home, in the community, on the board that you serve, that we don't say something that we could regret the following morning or 2 years later, that we don't get into rage and snap at someone unnecessarily, that we don't take out our anger on someone who had nothing to do with it in the first place. All those have a foundation in mental toughness. It gives us that stress tolerance towards unimaginable problems. Some of you right now may feel like your whole world has turned upside down. You may be literally shaking with fright with what's happened. At the start of this call, Jane was sharing some have had emergency family problems. Sometimes we get a call that can turn our lives upside down just like that. How do we stay sane and still show up for work at the clinic, at the hospital with a smile and be available to those people? And each and every one of you, you do that. Maybe you don't realize it, but you have a way of compartmentalizing some of the things that happen, and to be able to be there for your 3-year-old when they want a hug or when they're feeling sick and you have to get up at 2 a.m, and then you show up for work at 7 a.m. Mental toughness gives us that endurance during those stressors. And here's the difference when we practice mental toughness in a healthy way. We go through those challenges, the problems, the crises. We come out better, not bitter. You can write it down if you like, to come out better at the end of it and not bitter. You probably know someone's name might cross your mind when you think of someone who has undergone something and they have become so bitter and hardened by it. When we have mental toughness, we still have those difficulties. We may face the same problems. We come out better at the end of it. Mentally tough people remind us what the word beautiful is all about. Say it with me, wherever you are, even if you're on mute, if you're in a place that you can open your mouth and say it with me, beautiful. One more time, beautiful. Thanks, Sandra, for typing it too. Now say it this way with more conviction. I am beautiful. Say it aloud. I am beautiful. Whenever you feel like you're having a hard day, remind yourself, I am beautiful. We cannot give what we don't have. Write it down if you like. We cannot give what we don't have. If you don't have beauty to give someone else, if you don't have beauty within yourself, how can you give it to someone else? If you don't have the ability to maintain that composure when that coworker says or does something difficult, how can you be available to that patient 2 minutes later and listen to their difficult story? As medical assistants, you are tested in these areas, whether you may be aware of it or not. When we remind ourselves, I am beautiful, it gives us power. It keeps the power to ourselves so that we have that power to give someone else. When that little toddler is crying because they're in pain and you don't know what exactly is happening and you're dealing with a distraught mother. I have been there in clinics, in hospitals to know that. And I also know what a huge difference a medical assistant's temperament can make to a distraught mother. Because I have been in that situation, I know it makes all the difference in how a medical assistant handles those moments. Their look, the eye contact, the way they calm down the parents or the mother or the father, and how they are available to that child. Mental toughness gets tested in all those. Mentally tough people stand out like a waterfall in the forest. I live close to Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, and there are waterfalls all around where I live. So it's very common for me to see waterfalls around where I live. Mentally tough people are like cascading waterfalls. They're constantly flowing. Now, living in a tourist state like Colorado, and I live close to Rocky Mountain National Park, it's very common for me to come across tourists and visitors coming from Indiana, from Wisconsin, from Kansas, all over the country. They come to Colorado to look at the pretty mountains, to look at the pretty waterfalls. So it's very common for me to hear tourists say, we came to Colorado to look at the pretty waterfalls. I have heard that more than once. But you know something that I have never once heard from a tourist visiting Colorado? I have never once heard from a tourist visiting Colorado tell me, I drove for 9 hours all the way from Kansas to look at a drain in Colorado. And Colorado has plenty of drains too. D-R-A-I-N, drain. Colorado has drains and Colorado has waterfalls. But no one has ever told me they drove 9 hours from Kansas or 12 hours from Indiana to come look at a drain here. What's the difference? What's the difference between a drain and a waterfall, my dear friends, medical assistants? What is the difference? A drain is stagnant. A waterfall is flowing. A drain tends to get clogged with things. A waterfall is constantly flowing and clean. There's clean energy flowing through it. Why do I draw that analogy? To simplify how mental toughness and mentally tough people stand out. Mentally tough medical assistants are like waterfalls, cascading, constantly flowing. Rather than holding on to this thing that happened, they don't get clogged because they have so much energy to give, to share. And the job description of a medical assistant is so much about sharing and giving away and serving others that they become waterfalls. And a drain is ordinary. You get drains everywhere, isn't it? A waterfall is extraordinary. That's what sets mentally tough people apart. They are extraordinary. Mental toughness transforms the ordinary medical assistant to become an extraordinary, beautiful medical assistant. Some may feel, if you have questions, please share. And Jeanette, I'm so glad you like that analogy. It's to simplify what mental toughness is all about. One of the most effective ways to handle and to incorporate mental toughness is through mindfulness. Say it with me, mindfulness. One more time, mindfulness. At some level, people who practice mental toughness, I fear, practice mindfulness, whether they're aware of it or not. And different people might use different words for it. Some people might call it sitting still, quiet reflection. Some might call it prayer. Some might have a gesture associated with it as prayer. Some might call it meditation. Some might call it, they might go for a long walk, and that becomes a sense of mindfulness for them, to clear out the mind, to clear out the mind clutter. Jackie says a breather. Breathing exercises can become mindfulness. So different people might associate mindfulness with different things. I'd like to take a minute to address Amanda's question. Can you become hard from becoming so mindfully tough? I appreciate there's a lot of deep meaning there, Amanda, and I love the question. And as I unfold about mindfulness, I think the answer will come to itself. Where Amanda is asking if we can become hard-hearted or callous from becoming so mindfully tough. Mindfulness creates that flowingness, that cascading nature. I was talking about the waterfall, and it clears the mind clutter. Rather than becoming hard, it's like boiling water. If you put a potato, a potato becomes soft. If you put a raw egg, the raw egg becomes hard. So it's the same thing, the boiling water, it can lead to two different results. How we practice mindfulness, if we approach it the right way, how we practice mental toughness, if we approach it the right way, rather than becoming that hard-boiled egg, the medium of the hot water, whether it's mindfulness or mental toughness, we can actually become kind-hearted. And that, I don't mean that from a weakness point of view. I don't mean kind-hearted to say that it's a weakness. There is actually strength in kindness. There is strength in having that peace that we get from the inside. So I hope I was able to address it. And Jack mentions listening to birds and squawks provides mindfulness. Listening to Mother Nature, thanks for bringing that up. Just attuning ourselves with Mother Nature can make all the difference, because depending on where you live today and depending on your job description, we have become so disconnected with Mother Nature, and getting connected, and especially as today is not the day for us here in Colorado because it's a winter storm, but as spring unfolds, when we open the windows and we hear birds chirping and listening to spa music can make all the difference. So mindfulness can be a great way to build our mental toughness. Mental toughness is not just for the Navy SEAL, for the person in the front lines of an overseas war. It's not just for the priest who hears a tragic story of a parishioner who was just killed in a car accident and then 10 minutes later puts on a smile and celebrates Mass. It's not for the nun who hears a very sad story and then still is available for to teach the students at the school. It's not just for people in extreme job situations. It's for you and I. It's for people, it's for that single mother who juggles an unimaginable workload, and still she shows up for work at the hospital, at the clinic, as a medical assistant and puts on a smile. That's mental toughness. It's for that receptionist who has come to learn that after 30 years, her marriage is crumbling, and she hears that her husband is going with someone else, and she still shows up for work, and she's able to listen to the story of a patient, or she's available and she serves someone else. So mental toughness is not just this hardcore physical endurance, because I say that because we associate mental toughness with the marathon runner, with the Navy SEAL, with the paramedic. That's what we typically associate with. It's for ordinary people in ordinary situations, because our mental toughness gets tested. Does toughness mean that we have to be hard-hearted and callous? And that brings us to what Amanda was asking earlier. It means to go through sometimes the motions. You may have been a medical assistant for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and you feel like you've been going through the motions. You feel disengaged. You feel burnout. It's to be able to pass those tests without complaining, and to be committed long after that thrill has gone. Mental toughness really tests our ability to handle the daily reps. If you go to the gym, you do the reps every day. To handle the daily minutia, sometimes in our job descriptions, the daily minutia in our home lives. To maybe it's to pack that sack lunch and to do the laundry, and you feel like you've been doing it, and still be able to see what's at the end of it. Everything I have earned in my life has been all uphill. Everything worthwhile has been all uphill. And sometimes it seems like we hear a lot of this where we want everything, the instant gratification, because we are so used to at the click of a button. We don't want someone in our circle, so at the click of a button, we remove that connection on Facebook or LinkedIn, or we don't want to have to deal with that person, we remove them from the group chat. So we are used to this click of a button culture. It doesn't translate with emotions. And so whenever we have something difficult to achieve, our mental toughness gets tested. Everything worthwhile seems to be all uphill. I'd like to address, Jack has mentioned not just the Seas, all of the Navy. Greenside Corpsmen are similar to the combat marines. We were there for the marines. Thank you for sharing. Now I have to share that I am not well versed in all the different branches. So I'm so glad you're educating me, and you're educating maybe others also. It's not just the SEALs. Thanks for sharing that, Jack. So mental toughness is that winning edge, If you ever watched the Kentucky Derby, you see that the winning horse, it doesn't win by like 3 minutes, right? The winning horse, it's not like a 10-minute gap. It's a fraction of a second. That's another way to define mental toughness. The winning edge is such a fine line. And I have seen this in my life when I look back, not so much looking forward, because there's so much trepidation. There's so much of the unknown when I'm treading unknown territory, depending on the goals that we set for ourselves, especially if it's a goal that is very unfamiliar to us. We don't know what's ahead. When I look back, there's such a fine line between winning and losing. It's so fine that it's almost impossible to see it. And oftentimes, this is where that mental toughness, that gear really kicks in. Because when we feel like we're just about to snap, I've had it, I'm done. That right when we're about to say it, and sometimes you may have even said it verbally, but mentally there's still a part of you where you haven't given up on yourself. That's where the victory comes, and it's around that corner. So that fine line, that winning edge, is so fine that we can miss it. The mentally tough medical assistant stays with it just a little bit longer, and they see, once they make that turn, they see, wow, now I see why if I had given up, all that effort would have been in vain. And this could be with a difficult patient. It could be with, maybe it's a difficult partnership or a marriage, and you feel like, I cannot take this anymore. But the mentally tough person foresees ahead, maybe I'll get through this, and you're already envisioning that vacation trip around the world after retirement. To have that, I got to go through this rough patch, or this rough, I have to work with this difficult person for the time being. That's how, in different ways, our mental toughness kicks in during crises, problems, and sometimes even trauma. And Jeanette shares, I think medical assistants as well as other healthcare professionals relied on mental toughness during COVID, testing patients in full PPE. The hot Florida weather sure tested mine, wearing the masks. Thank you for sharing that. Joshua says mental toughness during war can be very tough. I would imagine so, and I appreciate people who have served in those situations. For them, when they feel like there's no 911 to call, right? And we feel like we have to rely on our own selves, on energy, and something kicks in. So thank you for sharing that. Have we lost our mental toughness? Do you think you have lost your mental toughness? Here's a good reference. Have Americans lost their mental toughness? Has the world lost their mental toughness? Here's a good reference point, I feel. Where do you think you stand when you hear some of the stories of everyday living, and sometimes combat in war, of your parents, your grandparents, and some of you, if you have, your great-grandparents? That's a good reference point to have, I think. Where do we think we stand when we hear some of the things they endured just to have a can of food, just to have heating, just to be able to have that outhouse in the cold winter months when it was 10 below, because it went 10 below for them also, or in the hot summer months like in Florida that you would have. I grew up in a hot climate in Sri Lanka, where they didn't have AC, and they still made it through. So mental toughness, I feel, is comparative. It's relational. Doesn't mean that they were stronger and we were weaker. Doesn't necessarily mean that. Maybe they didn't have to deal with some of the stressors and all the temptations that we are facing today. So it depends on the culture and the time period that we live in also. So let's go through some questions, 12 questions that I have. to see where we stand with our mental toughness. Now, if you say no to all of this, doesn't mean you don't have mental toughness, nothing like that. I truly believe that every person has mental toughness to some degree. It's just a matter of, if not, how can we survive? It's a question of the degree of mental toughness. So if you say yes to more than 10 of them, then probably your mental toughness may have taken a little dip. So it may be time to maybe address it and get a little refreshed in our mental toughness. So 12 things, time to sharpen the mental toughness. Do you say yes or no? When something goes wrong, is your automatic response to look at who to blame? 2, do you feel entitled as though other people should do the difficult things because they owe it to you? When we say that, sometimes maybe you have someone in mind, right? You feel like you always owe it to them. 3,
Excuse me, Preethi. I need to remind our participants to mute themselves. Vicky Pratt and Rena Hammer, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Can you repeat the questions because of the people speaking? I couldn't hear all the questions.
Oh, sure. So
Thank you.
Going through 12 questions, certainly. So if you say yes to more than 10 of them, probably an indication that we should be addressing our mental toughness a little bit. 1, when something goes wrong, is your automatic response to look at who to blame? 2, do you feel entitled as though other people should do the difficult things because you feel like they owe it to you? 3, do you start new habits but stop after a short while when it gets boring and you feel like the thrill has gone? 4, do you have trouble saying no to people? Now that I have the severe difficulty with that, I'm still working on it. 5, when someone rejects you, do you give up on yourself and feel unworthy? I think that's something to pay attention to, not to take rejection personally, and sometimes that can be very hard. 6, do you lose it under pressure and let your tongue run loose? I was that person for the longest time. I had this mouth with all the wrong stuff coming out of it, and that's one area I had to work on my mental toughness, especially, and I feel like I have made tremendous progress. I'm not where I want to be, but thank goodness I'm not where I used to be. So watching our tongue, that's one area. And I think especially for women, sometimes that gets hard. 7, do you get intensely wrapped up around what other people think about you and let that cripple you emotionally? 8, do you start things and leave situations in a mess and someone else has to pick up? 9, do you expect others to make you feel good all the time? Does someone from the outside, does someone have to constantly keep propping you to make you feel good? 10, do you feel like your happiness is the responsibility of other people? 11, do you run away from pain, both physical and emotional pain?
Hold on.
Shall I continue? Okay. 12, do you quit when things get hard? So those are 12 questions, and I appreciate your courage to say that, Jack, I'm guilty of running away from emotional pain. I think many of us do. I know I do. I think sometimes emotional pain can be far worse than physical pain. It's not as tangible as physical pain. Nicole shares, I was trying, oh, okay. So those are 12 considerations to see where we stand with our mental toughness. When we talk about mental toughness, we have a tendency to think it's these large wins. There has to be this huge milestone to determine our level of mental toughness, isn't it? It could be the marathon runner who wins the gold. It could be at the Kentucky Derby, the horse that wins a race, or this huge win. And that's another misconception I feel about mental toughness, because depending on the area of where we get our mental toughness tested, it's actually determined by small wins. This is what I mean by that. And I'll draw an example from my own life to make it simpler. And maybe you can relate to this, maybe you can't. But as I draw upon this example, you can see if there's an area in your life that is similar. For the longest time, I could not control my mouth and the words that came out of it, especially with a few people who knew exactly which buttons to push. They knew exactly which buttons to push that would set me off, and every single time. And I would say this went on for decades, probably 20, 30 years, not every day, not on a daily basis, but it happened in spurts. Whenever we had that encounter and whenever we ran into that conversation, it was like automatic. I was on autopilot. The same words kept coming and I would lose it. And it took me probably a good 25 years to finally become aware of it and to start addressing it. And so mental toughness makes us aware. Awareness is key, because if you are not aware of that area, how do you know that you're getting tested in that area, right? It's happening unconsciously. It's become automatic. It's become such a mental habit. So once I became aware, and I realized I had to address that. I wanted to address that. And it wasn't automatic. The awareness, yes, it came, but it wasn't automatic. It took the longest, and I'm still working at it, but I will tell you, I am not where I used to be, but I am certainly glad I'm not where I used to be. I'm not where I want to be, but I have made progress. So sometimes it takes tremendous effort and a lot of time, depending on what area you're trying to kick or what area you're trying to address. So I'm talking about the small wins. A small win for me was to not get all riled up around that same conversation for the 5,000th time. When that same person said the same thing, I now handle it differently. So for someone who doesn't know it, it's not such a big deal. It's like, so what? She's not really saying it's not such a big deal. For me, that's a big deal, because that's something for 25 years, I have been going on that same thing. And now I have finally made that switch. That switch, it's like the dimmer switch has slowly changed. So now it's not where it used to be, it's getting dimmer and dimmer. So that's what I mean by small wins. I do have some questions, so I would like to address when I can. Joni says, I have a difficult coworker that sits next to me every day. I pray for her daily. That's the kind of mindfulness that Joni shares. So in a different way, she's practicing mindfulness. And for me to get through the day with her snipping at me all the time. I've worked with her for 20 years. She's nice to everyone but me. This talk is helping me to understand what I have to go through on a daily basis. My stress level is 0 when she's there, but when she's there, I'm stressed. I'd like to briefly bring that up. I hope it's all right, because I think there may be other people that could be sharing, be able to relate to that. Joni shared, not necessarily with a coworker who sits next to her every day for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, but it could be, you may be married to a difficult person. You may be living in a relationship with a difficult person, an adult child. Sometimes it can be difficult with a lot of love. You're taking care of a special needs child or an adult parent, whatever the situation is. Some thoughts when Joni shared that she prays for her. Mental toughness, one of the best ways to sharpen that is through some kind of mindfulness. Joni shares prayer, it could be meditation, it could be sometimes when you see that same conversation coming, rather than you getting in reacting to it for the 1,100th time, you can say, hey, let me just I need to get some fresh air, and you go around for a walk, because sometimes it's a few seconds of biding time. You just need that time for a few seconds or for a few minutes. And sometimes people have a way of pushing your buttons, but they can show a very different face to someone else. within a matter of a few minutes or a few seconds, they show this very difficult face to you. But then in a few seconds, they show a very nice face to someone else. What exactly that is, I am not really sure. It varies with every person and that dynamic. But maybe there is a situation there you may be sending a signal to say, hey, this is something. And so when you practice mental toughness, you're showing a different signal that you're not reacting to that person. Because sometimes it's not about you, it's about that other person using you as a landfill to dump whatever they're going through. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not saying, Joni, or to anyone that that's okay. It's not okay that you are being a landfill for someone to dump and release their whatever they're feeling inside. But at the same time, you need your job. You need a paycheck. You like your job. Not everyone has the ability to just quit what they're doing. And mentally tough people don't just quit. We were talking about it earlier, right? That resilience to stretch without snapping, that tenacity, that grit when those storms come, that they are still able to see themselves at the end of the day. Very briefly, Susan says, mental toughness to me is when you finally semi-retire with your husband and find out that he is ill, when your provider misdiagnosed him. You're told he has 3 years, 5 years, leave you on the other side of the spectrum. Very difficult to build mental toughness. Thank you for sharing that moving story, Susan. Whether it is whoever who experiences that, you sometimes when we wait for something and then I'll be happy, well, that situation comes, but then there might be something else like what Susan is sharing. Then there is a medical diagnosis and not your fault. There was a misdiagnosis. That's when our mental toughness kicks in. So it's not only about, okay, I'll get mentally tough once I get through this problem. Because mental toughness has to kick in the midst of that problem. And here's a life tip for you. And I have found, and I'm finding this out now, and I see what a difference it can make. And I hope it helps some of you on this Zoom call, or share it with someone else at home or at work. Rather than waiting for something to happen and then putting in these principles of mental toughness, have them in place. Have them in place because you don't know when and what is going to happen 2 minutes from now. And that's when mental toughness kicks in. So rather than waiting for something to happen, and then it's going to take a lot more energy to, it's like heating up the house when it's totally cold and -10 and you're putting the fireplace. It's really hard. It takes a lot more wood and a lot more effort. Whereas if you still have some embers burning and the home is relatively warm, then you can put matchstick, a piece of paper or one piece of wood, and it sparks. Same thing. Rather than waiting, rather than becoming complacent and saying, okay, well, things are okay. You want to have the principles of mental toughness in place so that when something takes you off guard, or when that crisis happens, because crisis is always happening, or that problem comes, when that comment sets you off guard, you will handle it differently. So that's something to keep in mind. Joni shares, I have a difficult coworker that sits next to me. I think we already talked about that. Brady shares, I may not get to every person's question, so it's not that I'm overlooking you deliberately. I just want you to know that. It's due to time. Working in pediatrics, I have to practice mental toughness on a daily as all my patients are helpless and are fully dependent on their caregivers. It's very difficult to see a child suffering, sometimes due to the actions of their caregivers, and not react. I love the idea that mental toughness practice correctly helps us become better, not bitter. Thank you, Brady. And I do go to pediatrics for my, being a mother. And I appreciate your sharing that side of it. And yes, sometimes you can see the other end of it, and you can become such a source of strength. And at the same time, being in a profession like a medical assistant, it's not only giving. There has to be also some kind of receiving. And I think mental toughness, mindfulness helps us to replenish, because by every time you end up when you show up at your clinic or at your hospital, you have to be on. You have to be on. The switch is on. There's no time for you to just hang out. Okay, I'll kind of get to this. No, you have to be on from the time you walk in, or from the time you switch off your engine in the vehicle and you get out of your vehicle. So there has to be, if you're constantly giving as a medical assistant, which many of you do, there has to be also some kind of receiving. And the patients that you're working with, they are not necessarily able to provide that for you, because you have to be there for them. So if they cannot give back to you, there has to be some kind of innate system, like a fountain from within you, that kicks in, that self-replenishes you. That's why this topic is so vital, I feel, for medical assistants, for professions like medical assistants, for paramedics, for nurses, because this is something innate we have within us that we can pump from within us if we know how to tap into it, so that there's a better balance between that giving, you're constantly giving and serving others, but you're also getting something for yourself. Mental toughness helps us to get there. And some of you, when you get home, also, you're giving. So it never ends. So there has to be some kind of balance, because what happens if we don't have that balance? Some of you maybe already are in there, especially after the challenges experienced over the last several years. You feel burned. There's burnout, there's fatigue, there's disengagement. You show up for work, you're physically there, emotionally, mentally, you're not quite there. And that can be a very difficult place to be in. And mindfulness helps us to combat those. Mindfulness is something, I have this SIFT. How many of you use a SIFT? Maybe you don't really. Well, I got this when I was in Sri Lanka recently, but in Sri Lanka growing up, my mother would always strain tea leaves, the loose tea in this. And so I have some flour in it, but if you can see, you see the flour straining through. It's very hard for you to see the grains across the screen. But anyway, I brought some flour, and here's how we sift the flour, right? The finest grain flows through, and we catch the finest, and the clumps, the big pieces, are left here. That's the purpose of this. Why do I draw upon this analogy? That's what mindfulness helps with mental toughness. It clears the mind. It clears the mind. And mental toughness, mindfulness, that's what they do. It clears the mind so that the inessential is discarded, or inessential is left here. What we take is the essential part. That's why when we practice these, we are performing at an optimum capacity. Emotionally, mentally, we are performing at an optimum capacity. So this helps to overcome disengagement also. Because when we are disengaged, when we are burnout, fatigue, we are probably functioning on 20-30% capacity. And being medical assistants, that can be very draining. If we are practicing on very low capacity, emotional energy, then to listen to that sad story of a parent, or to listen to a heartrending story of a child who you feel is under neglect, that can have a very draining effect on a medical assistant. To prevent that, mental toughness and mindfulness, when we practice those every day, and that the clumps are discarded, and we are performing at an optimum capacity. Denise says, you take back your power and are in control of you rather than giving that power over to someone else. I really appreciate your sharing that, Denise. Very correct, very true, right on there. When we practice mental toughness, we practice mindfulness, we keep that power. We have that power within ourselves. When we lose that mental toughness, when we get angry, when we have rage, we freely give that anger. In anger, we freely give that power to someone else. And we're functioning at low capacity. Very true. Thanks for sharing that. Joyce says, I feel that I've had to have mental toughness to make it through. Like, thanks for sharing that, Joyce. You are a very strong person. And Janet says, I found out my level of mental toughness in the past 6 weeks when my husband was in ICU for 2 weeks following complications during surgery. Sometimes we don't know the level of mental toughness until we are in the midst of the storm. Until we get to that storm, we don't realize. But at some level, Janet, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. At some level, you probably had that mental toughness, even though you may have realized it or not. It kicked in. You just automatically almost kicked into that gear when you had that experience. Kathy, even an elastic can break when it experiences.
Where'd you get that at?
Kathy, thanks for
Erin
sharing.
Pershing, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Kathy, thanks for sharing. Even an elastic can break. Yes, and I do agree. It's not unlimited, especially if we have difficulties and crises and trauma after trauma and unlimited. There is a limit. I do understand what you mean by that. If I didn't address everyone's questions, please, I'm not overlooking you. I'll get to them when I can. So some simple exercises or takeaways to fight mental obsessions, because sometimes our mental toughness gets tested with our obsessions. Now, these are not like these huge things. Sometimes that obsession to look at our text alerts, our text message, obsession to look at the phone every 4 minutes, every 10 minutes. That's something I had to deal with a while back. And it actually became very daunting because every 10 to 15 minutes, I was looking at my phone. And those are distractions that drain our energy, that we don't function at full capacity. And a job like being a medical assistant, to be able to function at optimum capacity can make all the difference in the quality of your days, in the quality of your life. And it makes all the difference in how you show up for work, or how, when you finish work, how you show up for your family. Do you snap when your toddler says, hey, mom, or dad, are you able to come on my field trip tomorrow? Are you going to snap at them because you had such a stressful day? That's how we get tested through our mental toughness. Or are you going to say, even though you had a long day and you heard very heart-rending stories or saw very traumatic things, you had that innate system to replenish yourself. And when that toddler asks, are you coming to the farm for a field trip or for a spring break? Where are we going? You can say, well, let me think about it. Or rather than snapping, or say, hey, how about Colorado? How about Alaska? Wherever it may be. But that's how mental toughness gets tested. So if it's an obsession to look at your text every 10 minutes. I know no one here on the Zoom call has that obsession, right? No one has that obsession to look at your phone, right? You only look at it once every day. Well, I think many of us have that. Well, I had to first become aware of it because it was getting in my way. It was getting in the quality of my days. And focus, it really was disturbing. So I had to, whenever that tendency came to look at the phone, I had to, one thing I did was I wrote it down. I wrote down that obsession. So this is something to keep in mind. If you, whatever obsession you have, I'm not saying this is the only way to tackle the mental obsession. This is something.
First class at night, but let me just go first class at night when you're welcome now. You're like yourself.
You can
Maybe
maybe
you're
take
in
a
a main
paper.
or basic and you have a roller bag.
I'm sorry, Debbie Novak, mute your phone, please.
Will be full, possibly a part of me too.
I can't see where to mute people. Miranda, maybe you can help. Thank you.
I don't seem to have the capability to mute people.
There should be an
Oh,
if you hover over the person's box, there should be a blue box up in the right hand corner with 3 dots. You should be able to click that and mute the people, whoever's the.
It's not an option for me, even though I'm the host. It says chat pin, hide non-video participants. But thank you, Deborah, for muting yourself.
All right. So here's a few practical things you can do. If you have a mental obsession and you're trying to kick it, and it could be, now for me, I'm drawing upon the example of looking at the phone and texts and emails every 10 to 15 minutes. For you, it could be you have a tendency to get up from your chair from working every 10 to 15 minutes, find some excuse to do that. It could be a habit like smoking. You're trying to get on ending that. It could be a habit of constantly making a phone call to someone, calling someone or texting someone 30 times a day that you really don't need to. So whatever the obsession, good old-fashioned pen or pencil, good old-fashioned paper. Don't do this on the iPhone. Good old-fashioned pencil, good old-fashioned pen, write down your obsession. The minute you write that down, that's the first step. I cannot explain what it is, but it's the first step of your taking off the many steps to release the power that it has a hold on you mentally. When you write it down, it does something. I'm not saying the minute you write it down that it's going to stop. I had to work on it for a while, but I am better with that habit now. Now I don't look at my phones way as much as I used to, but write it down and then every day write that down. It could be at the start of the day. It could be at the middle of the day, if you can write it down several times. Today, I will not look at my phone until 1 p.m. So if it's if it's smoking or if it's you get angry with someone, today when someone says this comment, I will keep my mouth shut for 10 seconds. And that is one way of doing it. So writing it down. Here is another way to implement mental toughness in daily living. Whatever the habit that you're trying to kick or you're trying to subdue, well, let's say someone makes a comment during the Zoom call, during the phone conversation, you get home and the person at home knows exactly which buttons to push. You tell yourself ahead of time, today, when that person makes that comment, I'm going to count up to 10. And you count not in front of them, especially if it's your supervisor. You're not going to count 1, 2, 3, 4 in front of your supervisor. You don't want to do that. You're going to lose your job. It's too annoying. Not conscious, not verbally, mentally. You count 1, 2, 3. So you count just to buy time. 10 seconds. If it's pretty severe, 30 seconds. If it's very bad, 200 seconds. But you need time to kind of zip your lip for that time. So that's another approach to practicing mental toughness. With every second that you're counting subconsciously, 1, 2, 3, your mental toughness, that endurance kicks in. That's how you implement these simple things, and it manifests in our day-to-day living, and we get different results. Here's another tip for mental toughness. In our 5 minutes of closing, if someone says something, anger is something that we seem to be experiencing quite a bit at work. You can experience it at home. So much anger floating out there. We see effects of it all over the news. If someone says something to make you angry, if you're in a position, let's say you're on a Zoom call, and you have someone on that Zoom call that's pushing your buttons, or you're at your clinic and there's a difficult person that you're working with. If you're in a position, or if there's a place, a quiet room for you to lie down, That's again to buy time and for mental toughness to kick in. It's hard to feel angry when you're lying down. Try it. Try it the next time you get angry. Lie down. Force your mental muscles. Force it, because this is not something you might be doing on a regular basis, right? So force your mental muscles to lie down and see if you still feel that level of anger. And you feel that anger slowly abating. That abating, that anger getting less, that's how mental toughness kicks in. So you don't react to that, what that person did or said. So those are some simple anti-venom shots that I would call them. And you get a rattlesnake bite, you give anti-venom shot. So when we have things that push our buttons, that's how the mental toughness, we implement them in our daily living. In our 3 minutes of closing, do you have any questions, or I have a few more thoughts to share? Amanda says the internet has modified mental attachment and higher mental function. That's a great resource to read on the topic. That's another great thought. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, so in our 3 minutes of closing, I'd like to share 3 basic things, and I do these. And it's brought me results. I'm not where I want to be. Thank goodness I'm not where I used to be. So I still have a long way to go. But 3 very simple things that you can do right now, right after you finish this Zoom call. Figure out one area that you want to attack or address, change for the better, and then implement these. 3 ways to build that winning edge, your mental toughness. 1 is visualization. If it's to have a picture of it on the side of your laptop, if you're working from home, if you're working at the clinic or hospital or the medical staff building, keep it by your cubicle. You probably have some Post-its already. It could be a quotation. It could be a picture of a vacation spot that you are waiting to go to. You tell yourself, well, I'm going there, but first I have to get through this. To remind yourself, visualize. And the key is to believe it before it happens. If it's your tongue that you're trying to control, I talk about that because that's an area I had to address for the longest time. Then today, you have some inspirational quote. Today, when this happens, I will count to 10 and have that posted on your cubicle or in front of your medicine cabinet when you're brushing teeth. That's another great place to have. It's like the silence seminar, silence webinar for you. And next step, 3 things we're talking about. 1 is visualization. So do something to visualize. 2 is repetition of affirmations. Careful what you tell yourself. Tell yourself empowering things that will build you up. I am confident. Today, when someone says this, I know I will handle it differently with calmness. Even if you don't handle it with calmness right away, just keep telling yourself over and over and over again. It will happen at some point if you keep repeating those affirmations. In our final minute of closing, our 3rd point, how to implement our mental toughness is self-confidence. So important. Self-confidence, how you feel about yourself. We started off, what did I ask all of us to share and tell at the start of this webinar? I am beautiful. I am beautiful. Remind yourself that you are worthy. And when you feel good about yourself, those affirmations kick in and it helps to address the things that come your way. So let's end off our session with saying something very empowering. I am beautiful. Let's say it together. I am beautiful. Thank you, American Association of Medical Assistants. Very excited. I'm so glad we could get together today. And I hope you can share this for your own life and perhaps with someone who needs some of these in your life. And if I didn't get to everyone in the chat feed, it's due to lack of time. I am happy to address them. You can let me know. In the meantime, join me on LinkedIn and visit my website, preethifernando.com. I wish each and every one of you good health, peace of mind, and financial prosperity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I want everybody to know she's doing a session at the Orlando conference, or maybe more than one. So if you want to meet Preethi in person and enjoy her presentation in an additional time, then please come to the conference. Monica is on the session, and I am going to allow her to speak. Monica?
Yes, ma'am.
There you are. Monica Case. You may not be on right now. Don Belesa, are you with us? There you are.
And
Please.
yes, I'd like to thank Ms. Fernando for that wonderful, inspiring talk. And I was also encouraged by how a community formed sort of simultaneously to this. It just kind of sprang up. And I think that was a very positive thing. So we are grateful to you. I want to also thank Jane Seelig and her leadership development strategy team. This is a really dynamic and creative and wonderful group of leaders. So if any of you are interested in volunteering at the AAMA level, there are several of these groups. And I know many of you are already serving in some capacity, but I would highly recommend that. And proof of their work is what you just heard and saw. And they have some other great things planned for the future. I'd also like to thank the AAMA staff that was instrumental in making this possible. I would have to say that I experienced firsthand how resilient and committed the medical assisting world is during the pandemic, because I received your email questions about scope of practice. You were being asked in some instances to do things that you had never done before. And I remember one of the emailers saying that they're facing an all hands on deck situation at their place of work, and ask some scope of practice questions. And I'm happy to report that now that we're in the post-COVID world, I am seeing an increasing appreciation for medical assistants. I spoke at the MGMA Finance and Operations Conference earlier this week, and the people in attendance were the operations managers, financial managers, not so much the CEOs. And they had so many good things to say about medical assistants, and in particular CMA's AAMA. So I wanted to pass that word of encouragement along to all of you. We're still facing challenges such as legislation in some states that is not at all friendly. I'm primarily talking about Washington State, and I see many Washington State people on this call, and you know all about that, but I'm also seeing some very positive developments in a few other states. So we will continue to fight the good fight for you. And again, I commend you for how you have really risen to the situation during the pandemic, and now afterwards during this time of transition. So thank you again to all of you, to Jane, to the team, and I look forward to future events like this.
Thank you so much, Don. We do appreciate all of the efforts you put in on our behalf and have for many, many years. The leadership team that's now opening the conversation to anybody with questions or issues they would like to see addressed. We're making plans for our leadership session at the national conference. And we do have an agenda that we're addressing, but we need to know what your thoughts are and what interest you have in any issues that you're facing. The volunteer leadership form, I believe, has been posted again on the AAMA website. It is in the process of being updated, but the one that's on there now can be completed and submitted for anybody interested in assuming a leadership role on the national level or participating in any of our committees. One of the questions or issues that we're attempting to address is the mentoring and developing of future leaders and keeping our membership active and thriving. Comments, ideas, you can unmute yourself for the conversation, please.
I don't rather have a comment or an idea as of yet, but I am curious. You're mentioning about this committee at the national conference. Is that open to everybody within this chat room currently, or is this something specifically for your level of leadership?
This is open to all state and chapter leaders. It's a state leader session, but chapter leaders are also invited to attend the session. It is for helping us develop and encourage and move forward. It does not just have to be people who are interested in serving on the national level. So it is everybody who is invited to this session. Yes, Jack.
Thank you for
your
clarifying.
words. Amy, do you have anything you wish to add?
Sure. I just want to remind everybody, as you start having all of your state conferences, and as you get your delegates and alternates voted in, remember to turn in your the form for who are your delegates and alternates. That's due by July 25th. We did change the form around a little bit this year. You know, we have certain committees that delegates and alternates can serve on for the House. And then we also need some people that are not delegates or alternates to serve as pages and tellers, and then also on the credential committee. So if you are interested in potentially serving on any of those committees, we have changed the delegate form so that that can be marked under the delegate or alternate's name, or there's a section on the back for those that want to be a page teller. So if you're interested in possibly serving on one of those committees, just let your president know so they can mark that on that form. And then once we get all those forms, then we'll start, Vice Speaker Bogar and I will go through and look at formulating those committees for the day of the House.
Amy, when you mentioned to let your president know, is that on a state level? I'm guessing, I'm assuming that's the state level president, correct?
Yes, yeah. So the state president is the one that'll fill that form out to list your delegates and alternates. And then they can list it on there. Or you can reach out to you can reach out to me as well if you want to just let me know if you're interested as well. So I'll put my email in the chat. So if anybody's interested, just let me know.
Monica Case, is your audio problem resolved? I see that you're still on.
So I believe we're back up, Jane. I was actually on, you just didn't see me. It had me listed as Nick for some weird reason.
Okay, sorry.
So thank everyone. This is a great turnout. Number one, I would like to say, we want to thank all of our state leaders here all that you do for medical assistance and what you do for anything. It's great. I just want to remind everyone about that volunteer leadership form that we're talking about. Let's look at that. We'd like to get everyone join there. I would love to have more and more people on these committees, and we'll be looking at this for the upcoming years for 2024. Excited about that. One thing we'll be hearing shortly, conference information coming, registration, and about the hotel release. Just want to leave you a watch for that ebook. And we want to thank you so much for all that you do for us. And thank you, Jane, for letting me get in and speaking.
Oh, I'm just sorry I didn't get you when you were on the agenda to begin with. Thank you.
No problem.
You are state and chapter leaders, and that you're the ones who got the invitation to attend this. we want to encourage everybody to be involved and to mentor those people who are coming along and identify your new leaders and encourage them. I think this session was fabulous for encouraging us to be all that we can be and to keep our organization filled with talent and interested people. Do any of my committee members have anything they want to contribute as well? I seen a number of them are on the session.
Jane, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
So I just want to remind everybody, the partnership committee work, we had the grant from NCCRT and we developed that colorectal screening panel discussion. The goal of the grant was to really educate students. And so we did create that panel discussion about colorectal cancer screening, the medical assistance role. And so we did get that sent out to all of the KHEP and ABHES schools and encourage the educators to include that as part of their lesson plan or to show it to their students. So if you know any educators, remind them of that. And then we also wanted to provide that to our members for free for the month of March, since it's colorectal cancer month. So just want to encourage everybody. It's got a couple more days that you can take that. It's in the e-learning center on our website. And for, like I said, the month of March, it's free for everybody. April 1st, it'll go up to whatever the normal $10 or $15. So just as a reminder, you got a couple more days to take it if you've not. And encourage to share the educators to share that with their students.
One of the things that we want to emphasize to our leaders when we are trying to recruit our non-members, our non-CMAs, the people who have chosen not to renew their membership, remind them that as a member, it does cost them less money to get their CEUs and recertify by being a member. We had somebody who said it was so expensive to do their recertification. Well, if they're a member and they are active in their state or chapter, just participate in the educational workshops offered. And they participate in the free CEUs that AAMA offers on the national level, the state, and the local level. They don't have any expense that they have to, additional expense they have to recertify at the end of their 5 years. And the membership committee, I know, is working on promoting this, that it's amazing that it's, I think, less than a Starbucks a month for you to join and be a member. Candy, is that, what are those figures? You still have those?
I think it was like $8 a month or like $5 every 2 weeks. I'm sorry, I don't have that documentation in front of me, but it's not a whole lot. So.
And don't forget that the July 1st promotion has been continued, that from July 1st to October 31st, there's an $8 discount on your dues for renewing after that time online. You must renew online. Miranda, did I see you with something you want to say?
Yes, I posted it in the chat. To receive credit for the CEU session that we just had, please open the link to the SurveyMonkey attendance form. You just need to provide your name, your member ID, your email, and the code word, which was just teamwork. And that survey or attendance form really is going to be open until Tuesday, in case you're in a place right now that you can't fill that out. Or you need time to look up your member ID. So please be sure to do that. I'll repeat the link a couple times in case it gets buried. I'll
Oh, shit.
also share again, thank you for someone who asked me, the handout I shared earlier. Yes, and if anyone had to leave, if you know anyone who was in this session that you saw left right after the session ended, please let them know about that attendance form.
Or I'm sure that you'll be hearing from somebody that they didn't get their CEUs.
Jane, can I add one thing real quick?
Sure.
Jane, somebody has their hand up by the name of Tony Kaufman.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Amy, I'm an educator, and I did not get that email concerning the congenital cancer for students.
Okay. Can you put your email in the chat box and we'll make sure we get that e-blast forwarded to you?
Okay, thank you.
Yes. I was just going to share something. I attended the New Hampshire's conference this morning virtually. But when you're talking about the cost of membership, Todd McGee is their state president. Right. And I thought he used a very good visual for his members. He held up a quarter and a penny and he said, this is how much it costs each day to be a member of the AAMA. And I thought that was, and I know I saw someone put it in the chat there, kind of broke it down, but I thought that was kind of a good thing as a visual to somebody to see. It's, 26 cents a day for their state. I know they don't have chapters, so their fees may be just a little bit different than some other states, but I just thought it was a good visual to see how little it is each day. And I know, think about how much we pay for Starbucks or something, for each day or a couple days, how that is associated to that 26 cents. So I just thought I would share that in case somebody else wanted to use that as well. But Todd McGee's idea from New Hampshire. So
That is wonderful. And the code word again is teamwork, and I am putting it in the chat. And I want to thank Miranda for reminding me of that. We'd worked that out. And I forgot a few other things going on. Any other issues or things you would like to discuss while we have leaders who are here and can share successes or issues or problems? I'm looking. Well, I know this educational session has been, for me, very spectacular. And I again want to thank the CEB for allowing us to have this. Ms. Fernando offered to conduct a few CE sessions without charge. That is in conjunction with her presenting at the national conference. And believe me, we jumped at the chance. So want to thank you again very much. It was very educational, very exciting. And I look forward to meeting you in person. Yes, I think everybody enjoyed this. All right. Go look for the link that Miranda put in there to get your CEUs for this session. And we appreciate your participation. If you have anything that you want the leadership team to focus on or look at, just go ahead and send me an email, a text, anything else, and have a good day and go ahead and do a good job in your role for AAMA. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.